At Raising Financial Freedom, we're on a mission to inspire and empower financial freedom to every parent so that they can pass it along to their children. Through engaging stories, expert advice, and actionable tips, our podcast is transforming lives and helping listeners take control of their financial futures. Your support helps us produce high-quality, impactful episodes, expand our reach to underserved communities, and keep this life-changing content free for everyone. Whether it's $5, $10, or any amount, every donation fuels our mission and makes a difference. You can donate by clicking the heart-shaped link next to the social icons or the link at the bottom of the show notes. Once again, thank you for supporting Raising Financial Freedom and joining us in creating a world where financial freedom is within everyone's reach. Together, we can make a difference.
We're back with another episode of Raising Financial Freedom. I'm your host, Eric Yard, and on today's episode 9, we have a doctor by the name of Gurpreet Padda. Now, Gurpreet has a strong background in finance and also in real estate. He's here to share some fun facts with us and also some interesting points about doctors and the way some of them conduct their finances. And as a child, he started his own company. So let's get right into it.
Dad, hurry up and turn on the music.
Have you ever wondered why some people seem to have it all financially? Do well-off parents simply hand their children money? Or is there more to this wealth thing? Welcome to Raising Financial Freedom, the podcast. We are here to talk about everything you never knew to teach your children when it comes to starting their financial future. The principles behind wealth and methods that are out there to teach your child about personal financial freedom. There is no real trick to earning other than learning. We are here to discuss, teach, and grow with you. Raising Financial Freedom, the podcast, with your host and concerned parent, Eric Yard. Let us get right into today's show.
Today, I have Gurpreet Padda. Gurpreet, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
You have a very interesting background. Let's talk a little bit about it. I want to go back to when you first started working first. That's what I want to talk about.
Okay.
You had a background in construction and you started working at the age of 14. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I was an immigrant. I grew up in India and we left a very tumultuous country at a very tumultuous time. I barely spoke English. The only words I knew were bathroom, essentially, when I got to the US when I was about 9. And I started my first company around the age of 14. Wow. And the only reason I did that is because nobody told me I couldn't. I had come from an area where you had to hustle and survive constantly, and you did whatever it took to survive. And you did whatever it took because the only way you were going to get resources, the only way you're going to get money is if you hustled. So I didn't know that you couldn't do that. And my presumption, India had a fairly early mortality. So people would die in their 30s and 40s and 50s. That compresses the curve for behavior. You don't know what you don't know. And as a child, by the time you're 14, you're thinking, I better be productive and better figure some stuff out because how is survival going to occur? Now, I had the fortune of having amazing parents who were both highly educated. My father is a physicist. My mom is a mathematician. And I had that real benefit to having parents that would make me question what I was thinking and doing and how. And at the same time, I just had this incredible belief that anything was possible in the US. It was such a cool place. And there were so many things going on. And so I just started to gravitate toward more and more business stuff. But I didn't, and I had bad ADD also. I still have bad ADD. So I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know that I couldn't do things. So I just went ahead and did them and experimented. And when I failed at things, it wasn't a bad thing. I just used that to launch board into what would work better next time. So I was a very quick start, and I would fail a lot, but then my successes were better than my failures. And so that really was formative in how I started.
Working at 14 and starting a company at 14, who prodded you that way and how did it feel back then?
I didn't realize what I was doing. I knew that I wanted to, I was very curious about construction. I was curious about mechanics and making things. And so I didn't know that that was unusual. I just figured you do stuff, you want to figure it out, and you just do it. But I also knew that I didn't know how to do construction, but I knew there were people that knew how to do construction. They just happened to be older than me. And if I hustled and cut grass and made extra money, I could then save up my money and I could hire somebody else to teach me how to do something else while I worked alongside them. And so I was hiring people to do roof jobs. I was hiring them to put in wind turbines. I was hiring them to do landscaping. I was hiring them eventually to build basements and do plumbing. And so I was hiring people that were older than me because they had the experience, because I knew I didn't have the experience to do it, but I had saved up enough money that I could afford to pay them. And as they were working, they were basically acting as my labor mentors. And then I learned the things that I learned from the School of Hard Knocks. These are the mistakes you make when you hire people. And this is how people can take advantage of you if you're a kid. So by the time I was 15 and I was in high school, I had a team of 2 or 3 guys that were working for me at any given time. And I couldn't drive yet. So they would drop me off at high school. And then I would take phone calls in the cafeteria on the payphone to know what their status was during the daytime. And so I learned how to remotely manage people. And then I discovered the unfortunate concept of taxes, because I didn't realize I had to pay taxes. I was making a lot of money as a kid, but I also didn't know that I had to pay taxes. And so that sent me down another path of understanding this concept of capitalism. And by then I started to read, I had been reading about Ayn Rand and Fountainhead, and I had taken economics. And then I started to understand the model that I was really in. I started to understand the concept of taxation, the concept of capital markets, the concept of all of these things that I had taken, that I just did because I was just trying to do something. But then I was able to put words to what I had been doing. And at the same time, I also liked science. So I ended up going to a 6-year med program at the age of 17. I ended up graduating from medical school by the time I was 23 or 22, I think. But then I was still into wanting to do business. So I kept that going and went to school as well.
Okay, so fast forwarding, you have a medical degree and you're a doctor now, but you have a strong background in finance. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I have a degree in finance, international finance. I got that from St. Louis University. And I got that because when I got into medical school, I went to surgery residency. I went to anesthesia. I was in academic anesthesia, pediatric anesthesia at Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital at St. Louis University. But I was still doing business. But in that process, I became intrigued by the healthcare model and how that works and what are the financial levers in that healthcare model. And why is it that some medications are cheaper than other medications? Why is it that some things work better than other things, but they're cheaper? Why is it that some things that work less well than other things are more expensive? And so I was trying to understand the cost-benefit relationship between expense and outcome. And I needed to understand that better than basically off the back of a napkin, which is, I couldn't bootstrap that. There was more economic modeling that I didn't understand. So I got my MBA because I anytime I do something, I try to dive deep into it to understand it. That's not necessarily always the best way to approach things, but that's just how my mind works, that I want to dive deep. I want to understand. And so I got my MBA so I could have a better understanding of financial modeling systems. And I specifically wanted international finance because I wanted a comparison between the US healthcare markets and international markets. I wanted to see what the effects are, for example, why are the pharmaceutical costs in the United States 5 to 10 times greater than the pharmaceutical costs in third world countries for the same drug? Why is that? And what drives that? And understanding it, what's the benefit of doing research here versus doing research there? And so that I ended up getting an MBA in finance and worked at understanding that better. I eventually ended up running a bunch of anesthesia departments in various hospitals and also developed an intrigue and understanding of what anesthesia was, what interventional pain was, what addiction was. And I ended up getting boarded in those just because it was something that I was super curious about. And so I was able to feed my curiosity.
Okay. So being a doctor, that's a high profile job and a high paying job. But once again, it is a job just like most professions out there. Now, from my understanding, there are doctors who are still living paycheck to paycheck within this profession. Can you tell me why that's?
Yeah. It's not unique to doctors. Just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean that you're financially stable. So what happens is that physicians, we spend our whole lives trying to figure out how to be really good physicians, but that blinds us to everything around us. And so physicians declare bankruptcy at nearly the same rate as the general public. Physicians end up dying broke at nearly the same rate as the general public. Physicians trust in their advisors and are in the stock market just like the general public. And in fact, because doctors, I'm going to tell you straightforward, doctors are narcissists, the vast majority of them. Because we hold people's lives in our hands, we assume that we have some special power of knowledge, and it's simply not true. We're no better than anybody else. It's our own ignorance that gets us into trouble. And that's why doctors actually are more likely probably to get themselves into a financial mess. They deprive themselves to get through school. Their school costs a lot. But as soon as they get out of school, they've never had a financial underpinning or education underneath their medical. And they end up in incredible amounts of debt. And the second you have any reason why that physician can't make money, for example, temporary disability, the birth of a child, COVID, for example, the COVID reduced surgeries in the United States by nearly 70%. And so orthopedic surgeons, pain doctors, dermatologists, ophthalmologists, people that were making a lot of money, all of a sudden couldn't make any money for 3 or 4 months. And it will end up having pushed 40 to 60% of them into bankruptcy. You're going to see this huge shift in people leaving private practices and having to join hospitals. Now, at the hospital, they're going to give you a 401k. The 401k is going to track the stock market. What you don't realize is that we have an inflationary period. The stock market appearingly is going up, but your purchasing power is going down. We're not going to have deflation. We're going to have inflation. And so even though with quantitative easing, even though we're printing a bunch of money and through open market, the Fed is buying open market treasury, open market bonds and things of that nature, it's falsely elevating the stock market. When that stops, the stock market drops, but we've already devalued our currency. We've lost 30% of our purchasing power in just a matter of a few years. So you end up not being able to effectively retire because what you thought was $1 million is now only $500,000. And what you thought was $5 million is only 2.5. And so the physicians are themselves going to be in some significant trouble, even though they make a lot of money.
What is the craziest thing you've seen when it comes to doctors and their finances? Introducing the Dollars and Cents Bundle. This isn't just another boring financial guide. It's your secret weapon for raising financially smart kids. Inside this bundle, you'll get 3 powerful tools to make money lessons a breeze. First up, a kid-friendly budget sheet. It's the perfect way to help your child track their money, build healthy habits, and get hands-on experience managing their earnings. Next, you'll unlock the guide Money Mavericks, bite-sized wisdom for busy parents. Think of it as your quick start playbook, packed with expert-backed tips to help you teach your kids about saving, spending, and everything in between. And finally, there's my favorite part, interactive digital flashcards. These are perfect for teaching core money concepts in a way that's fun, engaging, and memorable for the whole family. Here's the best part. The Dollars and Cents Bundle is completely free. Yep, free. All you have to do is sign up and the tools are yours, delivered straight to your inbox. You owe it to your kids to give them the skills they need to succeed in life. The dollars and cents bundle makes it simple, fun, and totally doable, no matter how busy you are. So what are you waiting for? Make financial literacy a family adventure. Head over to show notes right now to grab your free dollars and cents bundle link, or go to nurturingfinance.com and subscribe. Don't wait. Start your family's financial journey today.
They over rely on the people that know how to massage a narcissistic behavior. So this is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. What happens is that, and this is why pharmaceutical companies hire good-looking people to go into physicians' offices to sell their wares. They have people that feed the ego of the physician, saying all the things that the physician wants to hear about how good they are. At the same time, the pharmaceutical company is getting that physician to prescribe a drug that may not be the best solution for the patient. And so that creates a false narrative, a false economics. Now, the same thing happens with physicians and their financial advisors. Physicians assume that the stock market goes up 8 to 10% per year. And that may be true. It doesn't work exactly that way. And it doesn't work that way. If you look at the S&P 500 or you look at NASDAQ, what happens is when a company goes bankrupt, they get pulled out of NASDAQ. So that 100% loss of that company that got removed is replaced with a new company. And so if you had invested in the NASDAQ overall and you had bought that company, that portion of your shares went to zero. And then they replaced it with a new company. And so appearingly, in your 8 to 10% return year over year is not actually that, because you lost 100% on some element of it. And so when you do these stock market investments and they're feeding your ego, you may not realize that you're not doing the right thing. And most physicians really don't have a lot of financial wherewithal. They've never learned that in medical school. That's not a model that they've experimented with. They don't understand it. And most physicians have a mindset that money is dirty. They think that the ultimate positive thing is to take care of your patient and ignore money. But if you ignore money, you can't take care of your patient.
So let's go back a little bit. The parent has a child and they're in high school and they say they want to be a doctor. What can a parent teach a child when it comes to personal finance and depth before they look to really dive into becoming a doctor?
Yeah, so I think, here's my view. And I have two delightful adult children. My daughter is in veterinary school at Ithaca, and she's doing very well. And she's very inquisitive and pushing the boundaries of education and just loves it. My son is in bioengineering at Cornell also, and he next year will be in business school. They're both loving it. We didn't start their financial education when they were in their teenagers. I didn't start it in their adolescence. You start the education in the first adolescence, which is the age of 2 and below. You have to realize that children, they're basically parasitic and they're observers. They depend upon you for everything, and they're observing your every action. And they're determining, based upon those actions, a model of behavior in the world. And these parasitic observers end up becoming participatory innovators. They end up becoming makers of themselves later. And that starts in the first adolescence, which is the age of 2 and 3. And so that you have to intercede then. And that's when kids should have their financial education. And that financial education doesn't mean you bring a bunch of money and put it in front of them and ask them what the tax rates are and what a cap rate is and what IRR is. No, it's the concept of game theory. That's all. Money is game theory. And so you have to be able to play innovative games with kids at a very young age. And mathematics is that innovative game. We used to play monkey math when my kids were 2 years old. And monkey math was, if you have a monkey and a monkey wants to eat 3 bananas and he has 2 friends and they each want to have 3 bananas, how many bananas do you need? You start at a very rudimentary level. And from that, you build, and you have the children participate and understand that taxes are not a bad thing eventually, because they're going to ask you about the tax thing, because they're going to hear about it. Are taxes bad? Why should we pay taxes? What does it do? And they have to understand that, just like game theory, taxes are an incentive. You figure out what the incentive is, align yourself with the rule of that game, and realize that taxes are very beneficial if you play the game. Those are the kind of things, and you start very early. You want kids to be able to understand those models. You want them to be able to create those models, play those games, and you want them to have failure. That's one of the things that I really feel like parents undervalue is failure. If your child doesn't do well at a sport, that's a good thing. They learn something. If your child doesn't do well at a sport and everybody gets a trophy, that child didn't learn anything. You want to positively reward when it's appropriate, and you want the child to make their errors in the game, because when you get to real life, those can be more permanent errors and they can have significant repercussions. So if you lose at Monopoly, that's okay, but don't lose at Monopoly in real life. And also, we just have to understand that you're educating these kids at the age of 2. They're understanding. They know what math is. They understand. Even puppies. If you give a puppy 3 treats and the other puppy gets 2 or 1, they understand that mathematics. They're observing that, and puppies know that the other one got more, and their behavior is consistent with that. So it's rudimentary. We've had 55 million years of primate evolution, and we've got 10,000 years of agriculture, and we got 3,000, 4,000 years of modern humanity in Mesopotamia. We need to recognize that these survival skills are 50 million years old. And we have to align our game theory with those survival skills and make sure that the children understand that.
Okay. So what do you feel are some of the pitfalls when a child is getting into college and looking to get into medical school that they can avoid?
You have to understand that you might fail. And so you have to have a backup plan. And that means that you have to recognize the cost of your education versus the outcome from that education. And each step is sequential. So I would never encourage a child who is thinking about going to medical school to get a undergraduate degree in music theory or in a completely liberal arts area that they can't leverage into some form of capitalism later. Because the reality is, if you're getting a degree in philosophy undergraduate, that's not going to get you a lot of income later, unless you're going to be the philosopher king and you're going to be really good at it and you're going to espouse something on Instagram and talk about it that way, which is extraordinarily rare. Getting an undergraduate philosophy degree is not going to get you the same leverage as getting an undergraduate biology or engineering degree or something that at any point, should you have a subsequential failure, what you have under your belt makes you profitable, makes you useful. At the same time, I believe that we seriously underestimate what we can accomplish over time. We overestimate what we can accomplish now, and we underestimate what we can accomplish over time. So I always encourage people to have side gigs, have something that you enjoy, and figure out how to align yourself with that thing that you enjoy and to make money at it. And that hustle, that concept of hustle, will permeate your skill set going forward. And each time, each iteration of educating yourself in that side hustle will make things better for you. And so one is learn from your failures, anticipate failure. Don't dwell on failure, but anticipate it and understand that every chess move that you make should put you in a better position. And even if you sacrifice in one way, you might do better in another. And at the same time, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Have a multitude of revenue sources and have a multitude of ways to grow.
Okay, let's go back to your first time that you purchased an asset. What was your first asset you acquired? And in your opinion, what is the first asset a parent should steer their child to get first?
So, are you talking about a hard asset like real estate, or are you just talking about a first
Either or.
investment? All right. So, I'll tell you the first investment that I made. And it's one of the stupidest things I ever did. I decided at the age of, I think 10 or 11, I was going to sell door-to-door cards, but I had to prepay for the inventory. So my first tangible asset that I'm acquiring is buying a bunch of inventory of cards. So I went door to door. I found people that wanted Christmas cards. We happened to live in the urban core of St. Louis. It was in the projects. And so I went door to door and got people to agree to buy Christmas cards in probably October with anticipated delivery in November. What I didn't recognize is even though people were agreeing to buy the cards, that doesn't mean they were going to pay me for the cards, because these were customized and I had their names put on them and I had to prepay for the inventory, and I hadn't collected the money yet from the people getting the cards, that by the time I came back in November to give them the cards, a lot of them had moved because it was their projects. People were moving all the time. And a lot of them had forgotten that this kid had come to them a month and a half ago to sell them the cards. And at that point, they didn't want them. So I got stuck with a huge amount of inventory. And so that taught me a valuable lesson to pre-sell and pre-collect. I think that it's really important to have your expectations very high. I walked in on my son one day, and I think he was like 12, or maybe he was 13. He was probably 13. And I walk in and he's at the dining room table and he's on the phone. And I overhear him say this, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm interested." And I'm looking at him and he's 12 or 13. I'm like, who's he talking to? And then the next part of the conversation was, "It's a nice neighborhood. Yeah, I think that's a good idea." And that really, that piqued my interest. And I listened. Then I sat next to him to listen to what he was saying. And the next words out of his mouth was, "Yeah, definitely, I can meet you there. I can meet, but you're going to have to pick me up." Okay. And he gave the address to where he was going to get picked up. And the next question was, "Yeah, I don't drive. I'm only 13." And the next question was, "Of course I've got the money. I wouldn't call you unless I had the money." So he had made a deal to go look at a piece of property that he thought he could make money at with a real estate agent. He ended up not buying that property. He didn't know what he didn't know. He didn't know that 13-year-old kids aren't supposed to buy real estate. But he figured that he had saved up enough money that he might be able to get somewhere with it. And he could always come up with a model to talk to his grandmother to see if he could borrow money there. So it was just fascinating to watch little kids do that, because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know they can't do something. It's us as adults that tell them that they can't do something. So we have to be very careful with the verbiage that we give our kids. And for me, I encouraged them. I said, "Well, that's a great idea." And so I said, "Since you're interested in this, let me give you some tools that might help you understand the property that you're looking at. And let's compare it to some of the other properties in the area so you can understand whether it's worth it or not." And you have to bring the analysis down to the kid at that level so they can understand it. And then they can jump forward and ask you more questions. Eventually, he ended up buying some property, but he was probably like 20, 19 or 20. And he ended up buying a couple of units and making decent money at it. And then all of a sudden he realized that I own this 4-unit and I'm making more money on the 4-unit on the passive cash flow from that than my job that I've got while I'm going to school. And then all of a sudden it occurred to him, if I had 10 of these 4 units, I'd never have to work again. And that changed his mind completely. And then it's like, I need to go to business school because I need to figure out a bigger method around this. And I got to figure out a way to really leverage my science, which I love, and business, which I think is going to feed me, and leverage that together. And that's why I ended up doing biomedical engineering and going into business school next year. Same thing with my daughter. She had a similar kind of experience. She started off a little bit more socialist, and she ended up becoming over time a little bit more capitalist.
All right. What are the unique investment niches that physicians can leverage?
So the unique investment lever, the asymmetric return that they can generate, which is higher return than the average for a lower risk, that is typically unique to their expertise. So let me give you an example. I'm in healthcare, and I am constantly looking at National Institute of Health guidelines. I'm constantly looking at emerging protocols in health. You would think that doesn't have much to do with investment, but it can, because if you understand the emerging technology and you can read that, then you can predict the next evolutionary new drug. You can predict who's going to do what, but you can even predict fundamental things, and fundamental things like real estate investments. Because I'm interested in understanding where grants are, where emerging healthcare markets are. If I knew about a particular drug and I was unique to that, and I didn't use public information, but I used private information, then that would be illegal. I would be committing SEC violation, Security Exchange Commission violation, because I knew something that somebody else didn't know, because I used my privilege to know that if I was in the research. Now, if I was reading general articles and I learned that, then that's a whole different thing, and that's not an SEC violation. But for example, I knew that there was a certain neighborhood in North St. Louis that needed a clinic. I also knew that there were a variety of nonprofits that had applied for a grant to put in a clinic. I also knew that there were very few pieces of available real estate that would fit that clinic. And I knew that in that demographic and in that zip code, it was literally 8 square blocks that they had to put a clinic in. And so I also knew that grant funding was going to come out at Friday at 4 or 5 p.m. And my personal intuition told me that the nonprofits were going to be so excited to get the grant funding that they wouldn't go out and identify their real estate parcels till the following week. So as soon as I realized who was getting the grant funding and that it had been authorized and approved on Friday at 4 o'clock, I immediately started hustling and went out and put every single available property that could fit that kind of clinic with that kind of square footage, with that kind of building under contract, under a lease option purchase. And I did it before Sunday. So over 24 to 48 hours, I put everything under contract for lease purchase. By the time that their real estate agent from the nonprofits went out and tried to find the real estate, I had all of them under contract. And so they had to purchase from me. And because it was a very economically depressed environment, I was able to get things at 20 cents on the dollar. By the time that everybody else realized it, those prices, I was controlling them because I had lease options on them all. And so I was able to get full value on the option purchase because I knew what the funding was that was allowable for the real estate leasing. So I knew exactly what they could afford. And so we were able to make a great deal. And that deal still throws off about $5,000 a month of cash flow for me because I was ahead of it. I rehabbed a building that was perfect for that group and had controlled it right at the same time as everybody else became aware of it. But I just moved faster than they did.
Interesting. What is the best piece of advice you can give parents to pass along to their children when it comes to finance?
I think the best piece of advice is to recognize cash flow, recognize where and how money moves. It's to play games with them, to create models so that they can understand the cash flow model. And how is it that cash flow occurs? How is it that money is created? And what do you have to transfer as in terms of goods and service to generate that revenue? And once you have a model in your head, you're going to do very well. But if you don't have that model, you're going to do very poorly. And so the number one thing is play those money games. Like I love Cash Flow for Kids. It's an amazing game. I played that with my kids when they were little. And I happened to be pretty young when Kiyosaki came out with his initial book. So I probably read that when I was in my teens. And so I think that those models are very important. And if we don't play those game models, if we don't treasure those game models, we're going to get our kids into trouble.
All right. Yep, definitely. So Going back to that conversation you overheard with your son and he was making that real estate deal. How did that make you feel? Did it take you back to when you first started?
Yeah, absolutely. I kept listening to him and I started laughing. And he thought I was laughing at him. I was like, no, I'm laughing with you because I think this is so cool. You don't realize what you don't know. And that's a good thing. And I'm not going to let you get yourself into terrible trouble, but I do want you to proceed. And I'm going to support you 100% because you've shown an inquisitive nature about this. I'm not going to be overbearing, but I'm going to give you the tools. Our jobs as parents are not to live the lives of our children. Our jobs as parents is to provide a safe environment for the children to learn in and give them tools to develop that knowledge. You can't force your child to learn, but you can give them the tools that if they show a curiosity about something, that you can help them educate. I find that a lot of kids that are just brilliant don't get very far because their parents don't give them the tools. They don't even realize that they can accomplish what they can accomplish. They don't know. And I think that because parents sometimes themselves have tremendous numbers of fears, they pass those on to the children. And that's a disservice for that child.
I feel the same thing too. I feel that same way too, but I try to take notice of that so it doesn't happen on my end. So Gurpreet, I want to thank you for coming out to the show. Can you please tell us where the listeners could find you, get in contact with you?
Yes. Yeah. So the easiest way is probably I have a website that I communicate with people that are interested in investment. It's www.redpillcapital, Kapital. So Red Pill Capital with a K, capital.com, redpillcapital.com. So that's probably the easiest way to reach out to me. On there is a ton of educational material. And if somebody really wants to understand where their own mindset is and what they're communicating with subtle language, I actually have it's totally free. There's no obligation. There's nothing that I ask of anybody, but I want people to educate themselves on mindset. There's a bunch of free resources with that they can understand where they are now and where they want to head. I always ask people, when you ask yourself at night, in the dark of night, and you're by yourself and you're thinking, money is, and finish that sentence. And the majority of people will come up eventually with money is the root of all evil. And that's a negative connotation. That's a negative expectation. And if you don't think that your children are picking that up by being observers, then you're mistaking yourself. You should come into it that money is a tool. It's just like every other tool. It's a sledgehammer. It's a leverage point. It's the fluid that lubricates the economy. It's the fluid that lubricates human interaction. It's just nothing more than a tool. It doesn't have a negative connotation or necessarily some dramatic positive connotation. But you have to understand your own expectations and where you're driving from so that you can teach your children correctly. I find they've learned in their first adolescence how they're going to be for the rest of their lives. And you can remodel them later. You can help them remodel and they can re-educate, but it's going to take a lot more work. So that game theory about money and resources has to be up front. And that's what I really hope happens with people, that they encourage and have their children grow into responsible adults by understanding their own problems first and then understanding their own mindset so they can help develop the mindset of their children.
So there were two things that I could definitely take out of that interview and use that and apply that to my strategy of raising my child. For one, let your children learn about failure. Let them learn how they failed, why they failed, and how can they make it so they don't fail again. Those lessons are crucial when learning finance and when learning about money. So when you see them fail, just look at it as a learning moment for that child and a chance for that child to get even better. The second thing I've taken out of that interview was it doesn't matter where on the scale you are making money. You could be a high earner, a mid earner, a low earner. If you don't know how to manage that money, if you don't know how to use your money correct, you'll fail. So if you're a high earner living paycheck to paycheck, you're basically in the same position as the low earner who's living paycheck to paycheck. So if your child gets one of these high profile careers, they can still end up struggling just like the rest of the nation. So learning about money and personal finance is key in the development of a child into adulthood. So once again, I would like you to like, share, and most definitely share with other parents and let them know about the show. Subscribing to the show and telling other parents about the show will definitely help us out here at Financial Freedom. Also, once again, we are on Twitter, so come out and check us out over there. Until next time, sit down and take the time to spend that special moment with your child and have that financial talk.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Raising Financial Freedom, the podcast. Stay connected with us directly through raisingfinancialfreedom.com. You can also join the discussion on social media, which you can also find links on our website. If you would like to speak with us, please send us an email through info@raisingfinancialfreedom.com. And as always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to please like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
Before you go, I wanted to tell you about a new option called Fan Mail, which uses text messaging to give our listeners the ability to text our show directly. There is a link in every episode at the top that will say, "Send us a text." You can use that link to text the show. When a listener clicks the link in our episode description, a new text message will open on your device directly to the show. It's that easy. So tell me what you think, what else you want to hear out of the show, or simply your thoughts on that episode you just heard.